Our world continues to change and push us in ways we have not been challenged before. On this show, we talk about these challenges, how to be aware of them, face them, and overcome them in your life. This is David Waldas, creator of the Aligned Living System.
And I'm Nick Musica, Aligned Living Coach. Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast.
Welcome to the Aligned Living System podcast. This is David Waldas here with Nick Musica, coming from Park City, Utah. And so if you listened last week, we were talking a bit about some of the development stuff, personal development stuff, some of the cutting edge tech stuff that I was working with Dr. Greg Eckel at the Energy for Life Center here, getting ready to go to another Bo Eason event. And really it was about personal development. You know, what does it look like? What does it take to keep moving ourselves forward? And, you know, we talked about the idea that people often think, like when I'm at work, that it's when I'm in session. But that's the part where I'm just kind of get out of the way, or completely get out of the way, and just let stuff come out of me, you know, channel it through. And really, when I think about being at work, it's all the things I do, you know, how I eat, exercise, meditating, the way that I'm running myself, that aligned living piece, not the aligned moments piece, that it's about having who I am and the way that I live my life match what I teach. And so it takes there's a just kind of a through and through commitment to that. And part of that is doing the things where the personal development is a priority. You know, like it's weird. I took, you know, for the most part, I took the last week and a half off to come do this and to be, you know, in this 5-day intensive with Dr. Greg, and, you know, the 2-day intensive with Bo and the mastermind group that I'm in. And profound stuff coming out of it. And it's funny, I was just realized I might have a little light bed head. I was just in the red light bed with Dr. Eckel beforehand, where it's these far infrared lights that I think I talked a little bit about it last week. They run these different programs of frequencies, but really fantastic stuff. But it was interesting. I woke up yesterday morning before I was doing another stem cell treatment with the lasers and the centrifuge. And I explained a little bit about it last week, at least the part that I understand of it. But I woke up yesterday morning and got this super clear message. And it was basically just a handful of words. It was trust, innocence, passion, and power. And then joy and playfulness, fulfillment all kind of came in afterwards. And at first, sometimes when messages come in like that, you know, they're not just a clarity of like, you know, here you go. Now you know exactly what this means. It's an opportunity for self-reflection. It's an opportunity to kind of get curious about ourselves and what does this mean, rather than here's exactly what this means. And it creates an introspective experience. It creates a place where we just become more, curious and exploratory of ourselves. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I discovered throughout the day about the innocence and, you know, the passion and the power and the trust. But welcome, Nick. We'll get into it because I know that you had a similar message this week too.
Good morning, David. I think it's morning
Yeah.
for you, right? You're an hour? What time is it there?
It's 10. Well, we have the call at 10, so yeah, it's just an hour later Mountain Time here.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah. So when you're talking, I'm just thinking about my week and what showed up, and there is certainly a couple pieces that map to what you're talking about. And if I were to give it the headline, it's a headline. It would be like the simple, basic things are the most important, and they're so easy to snub off because they're like eating well. Like it's got to be harder than that. It's not harder than that, right? Like and it is hard to plan your week, plan your day to eat well, right? Because McDonald's trying to get a sponsor.
Anti-sponsor.
Yeah, anti-sponsor, but still a sponsor. Or Carl's Jr.'s. You guys are free to call too. It's so easy to just access, you know, things in wrappers, processed food, all, you know, so that's the hard part of it, right? And you can say that for anything we're talking about here, right? Being honest with yourself. Something shows up and sort of blocks it, right? And you're saying some dumb shit that you don't even know what you're talking about, and then you realize you're saying some dumb shit because you're not being honest with yourself.
Yeah. Similar to that safety piece, right? That we talked about. Like, if we
Yeah,
feel we can be honest with ourselves to the level we feel safe. And as our safety grows, all of a sudden we start to realize there's areas that we just haven't looked at or haven't been as honest with ourselves, as true to ourselves.
yeah,
And when we feel safe enough to do that, we go, oh shit, how did I not see that?
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's just what it looks like. Yeah.
yeah. And so like those negative those the emotions that are the opposite of what we're talking about, right? Defensiveness or saying mean things or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
like they're such wonderful road signs
Mm-hmm.
to pause and say, is this really how you feel? Like, is this really what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So really, really quite lovely. The thing that showed up for me this week that relates to what you're talking about specifically was I was doing a reading for a young lady, and she has access to a bunch of really interesting,
An animal reading. Right?
yeah, an animal reading. Yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
she has a bunch of access to a some beings that I was not familiar with. Um, and concepts that I was not familiar with. And you can read about there's a really big difference between I read a book versus I experienced a thing, right? Like, and we all know that.
Yeah, that
Um,
oh shit, this is real thing.
yeah, and when it shows up, and to be able to look at someone in their face and say, I have a high level of confidence, like 100%, that I had an entity sitting in my lap, and this entity had zero sense of personal boundaries. Like that
Mm-hmm.
sounds crazy. Also, that was my experience, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so these are the type of beings that are sort of around us. And she's like, yeah, that's the ghost in the house. Yeah, doesn't have personal boundaries. And then this odd cloud showed up that she validated. She said, yeah, that's the alien that's been supporting me since I was a little kid, since I was a little girl. Oh, okay. And and when I was talking to the alien, this is where the simplicity of things shows up, is
Mm-hmm.
I was having trouble communicating. I didn't know what it was. That felt a little weird to me. And so like I felt unsure of myself in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
not really sure about what this thing is, especially coming off the heels of an entity sitting in my lap. Um, right. And so this whole thing is new and exciting. And also I'm navigating it in real time, and not communicating the best way that I possibly could. And the message I got back was lower your resistance.
Mm-hmm. And probably a little weirded out, right? And there's reason
Totally
to have
weirded out.
resistance. We don't
Totally
just
weirded
let
out.
whatever in.
Totally. Yeah. And if you
Yeah.
see the interview, you're like, I'm managing my weirded outness for about 45 minutes. Like I feel that the entire time. So I'm like, what the hell
Yeah.
happened? And she's validating these things, which is not like it's helping, but it's also keeping that weirded out feeling, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
completely firm.
Yep.
Um, but that piece of lower your resistance,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
which is really for me, this is what like all of this is about. It's like, do you believe it or do you not believe it? If you don't
Mm-hmm.
believe it,
Mm-hmm.
it will never show up, right?
Right. Right. Yep.
It's what's that phrase? If you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that maps here, right? So like there's a bunch of folks, and the conversation is not in favor of the conversations we're having, but there are a lot of folks who are having these conversations, but it's because the majority says, oh, that's weird, that's wrong, people are making shit up, whatever it is, that a lot of people sort of ignore their own experiences, or color them some other way, or whatever it is. And the reality is, well, those people, they have their own shit going on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
maybe they just never had one of these experiences, and that's a bummer for them.
Yeah.
But
Or they did and they shut it out because it freaked them out, right?
or
Because it
that.
didn't fit their paradigm.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I think that's the piece of where group work is so valuable, right? Like you talked about being
Totally.
validated by this woman that was interviewing you.
Yeah,
You're like, this is weird. I've never experienced this before. What the hell? But I'll say it because I know I'm having a literal experience with it.
yeah,
And then the person goes, yeah, oh, well, that's this and this. And it's already normalized for them. And so then you kind of go, oh, okay, well, this is real. All right. And I just had an experience separately, it got validated. And now I have to deal with that. And,
yeah.
and I think that's so much what we're talking about here too, right? Is when people have their third dimensional reality, and in those constructs and in the friend groups and in those, institutions, and even in religion, right? Where religion says this is how it is. But when we start to open up to these experiences, our paradigm often has to go beyond the way that it's described. And it doesn't mean when you get into more of the mysticism of each of these religions that it's not described that way. But the initial piece of sitting in church on Sunday it doesn't describe it that way. Like
Mm-mm.
to me, like Jewish mysticism is fascinating with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, like all that stuff. Like it gets into everything that we experience. But if you just went to a temple, say, like that wouldn't be the conversation. And so, like, it is there, same thing with Christian mysticism. Like, it's all there, but it's just kind of narrowed down to a more digestible piece that says, well, this is how things are, and don't look beyond this.
Yeah.
But what do we do when we look beyond it? And for a lot of people who go, oh, that's bad because it's beyond what I was
Yeah.
taught,
Yeah.
versus like, oh, okay, well, there's more here. This was maybe an entry into that, but if I don't let myself go to the next level, if I just try to cap it, now I have a whole bunch of weirdness in my life as I start to open up that I don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's here to support us,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we may color it something very different because, because it goes beyond our reality that
Yeah.
we've been told or assigned to, or the institution that we're in. And that, to me, that's where that innocence comes in, right? And that was part of the message that I got too, is like how do we open ourselves up with this innocence and trust, but also filter, and go, I'm not going to tap into that. That's not interesting. That's not a high frequency, but this is. And that was a lot of the aha moments I had really yesterday, which I'll talk more about another time because it's a long story and a whole in-depth piece. But that innocence of going, gosh, I don't really know what else is out there, but I know what I want to connect with. I want to connect with stuff that's really clean and clear and high frequency.
Yeah.
And I can be innocent about that. I can't just be innocent about like, I want to just have an experience, right?
Yeah.
And I see that a lot, and like we're just trying to have not an ordinary experience to prove to us that the 3D world is not all that there is, and that's very easy to come by. But, it's like selective innocence, really, because we can't be so naive that we can think that we need to let everything in. But when we go, what, the high frequency stuff, absolutely, I'm going to be really curious and allow for just an exploratory childlike experience with it. Yet at the same time, it's between here and here. It's like I'm not open to that other shit. I'm not open to an entity sitting in my lap. Right? Like I'm not interested in dealing with the ghost in the house. So that goes over there, but I am interested in this energy that's here to support me. And that to me, is what it is. That's really where all the growth is. And I think that for a lot of people, I can get so curious about like, God, there's a ghost. Like, what is this? Versus like, it's just not real relevant to me. Yes, it exists, but it's just not real relevant to me. I don't need to be innocent about that. I need to have a boundary.
Yeah.
But I do need to be innocent about, and to me, a lot of it was working with the archangels. And that was something that really reopened for me again yesterday. I was like, oh gosh, it was like a homecoming. I'm like, I know all you. I just haven't really engaged with you for 10 years because you were connected with something else that felt funky. And so I just pushed it all out. And to let you come back in, like, whew, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there should be purpose as to what we're allowing in and what our world looks like. And we were just on Tuesday where there was the presidential debates this past week. My wife and I went to this financial planning class, and as we're talking about going, the debates came up, and both of us sort of. My wife had more interest in seeing it than I did, but I was curious about it for sure. And when the realization of, oh, there's a conflict, we're only going to be able to do this thing versus this thing. I heard myself saying, yeah, but only one of the two things are relevant for us.
Yeah, one of them's only one of them's important. The other one is maybe bait.
Yeah.
And
this thing over here, the class, this can move the needle. This is going to be a meaningful thing for us. The other one, what's our control in there? What's the influence we have on that situation?
Yeah. And where does it take me so that I'm influencing things that are not in a positive way?
Right. I mean,
it's not a place for innocence.
No, it's not. Right. And as soon as you step into that pool of conversation of both sides and perspectives and extreme perspectives, you're just getting pushed around, or you're going to push other people around, or you're going to find like you're going to pigeonhole yourself into something. Where this conversation over here was, well, if this is your financial situation, here are your choices. If this is your
Mhm.
financial situation, here are your choices, right? There were things to consider. There was
Mhm.
immediate consequences to doing something wrong. There was
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
reward for doing something correct. Like
Mhm.
there was something you can work with over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Over here, there was nothing to work with.
No, no, it's just a train wreck, mess. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Go
And
vote,
it,
but go over
yep.
here to learn your finances.
Yeah. Yeah. And interesting. So I think the podcast title is Selective Innocence. And the idea of, and it's the difference between naiveness and innocence. And that's a really important distinction, because when we go, okay, this is something, and how does trust work out for that? So what are the containers that we're putting our trust into? Because what happens is we have an experience, we get jaded, and we lose our trust, but we lose it with a really broad stroke. We
Mm.
don't just lose it with, oh, I recognize that that's not the kind of person I can trust, or that's not the situation to have this level of trust with. And so when we start to be able to be discerning with that and go, okay, where do I want to, where does it make sense for me to actually allow for my innocence to come back? And it has to be in a container that we trust. And we tend to make our containers huge and go, there's a thing over here that I didn't trust, so I'm just gonna put everything in that container. Now, if I don't trust it, or I'm gonna be super skeptical, or I'm not gonna open up to it,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be innocent about it.
Yeah.
And that was something that returned to me yesterday with the archangels. I mean, again, it sounds so weird to talk about, right? But when we have these literal experiences with these beings, right? Like, before I had those, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'm curious. But then I started having literal experience, and I'm like, okay, well, this is just reality. And so it's not a third dimensional reality, but it's a reality. And
Mm-hmm.
then now that we have that, like, it opens up a whole nother level of discernment, which says I can trust this, and now I can be innocent, because this is a higher frequency that feels very clear and clean, and I get to be innocent in it. Something else, like, we'll use that ghost as an example. Not a place for innocence, a place for boundary, a place to go,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
like,
right.
you're over there, like, if that, like, whatever's going on there, like, it's none of my business. But this right here, this high frequency, that is my business. And now I get to be innocent, and I get to trust it. And when we do that, like, the side effect of shutting that down is our passion gets shut down, right? Because if you look at how passionate little kids are, they're so excited that you can see it
Mm.
in their eyes, and it's a rare thing to see an adult with passionate eyes, right? It was funny, actually, in the stripper, hanging out with a friend of mine's son who's 23 now, I think, and just super curious and passionate, and the big curious eyes, and just so fun to be around him. And it was like that, gosh, that innocence and that trust, like, it was so fun to connect with, and it was really like he taught us a lot about,
Mm.
what does that feel like. And I'm like, there's really a place for that for us adults, but we tend to make our containers of distrust way too big. And then we get sick of it, so then we make our trust containers, the container of trust, way too big, and then we go, I should have known better, I was so naive. But
Yeah.
it's about selective innocence,
Yeah.
not about shutting it down.
Yeah. There's this very mediocre surfing movie. And I feel like that's like that's the category of all surfing movies. This one movie I'm thinking of is called North Shore. Maybe it was the 90s. I forget when exactly it was produced, but there's a scene in the movie where the mentor surfer
Mhm,
guy in
mhm,
Hawaii, and he's a white guy, he's married to a Hawaiian woman, and the Hawaiian woman is talking to Rick Kane, who won a surfing contest in Arizona and is now going to the North Shore to surf the big waves. See, it's a mediocre surfing movie, but it's also fantastic. Highly recommend it. North Shore. And and she's talking to Rick, the wife is talking to Rick Kane, and she says something like, other people, uh, the age of I think his name is Chandler, Chandler, the age of Chandler, like they're old, grumpy old men, but Chandler, like he has life, he has enthusiasm, and I attribute it to his surfing. Like he's always looking for the next day of waves. Like there's always
mhm,
something to look forward to, something to be excited about.
yeah,
Um, and when you take that idea and map it to the real world and see what's going on. I mean, especially for me growing up, like the normal
yeah,
for me growing up was, oh, when you hit a certain age, which is where I
Yeah.
am right about now
Yeah.
is
Or 10 years ago.
or maybe 10 years ago
Yeah.
is you're terribly overweight and you're minimally a social alcoholic and right and
Jaded. Yeah.
yeah and right and that was that and that in relationship to Chandler, they're
Hmm.
two totally different things. And so that innocence of the next wave, the innocence of the
Yeah.
next experience,
And the trust
um,
that it's coming. Yeah.
yeah, the trust that it's
Yeah.
coming, right? There's always going to be another swell. There's going to be another wave in the set, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, to see that through the lens of this 20-something-year-old,
Hmm.
so that we can see it ideally reflected back in the mirror at us. Sounds like a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So fun, right? And that piece of just wanting to foster more and more of that in my life, and I have been, but there was a huge breakthrough for me yesterday with it. And realizing like some of the selective, like when you said, I think the message you got was open up more, or what was the
Lower the
message you got? The
resistance. Yeah.
lower the resistance, like the amount of resistance I had. And it was really resistance for support, but it was standing too close to what wasn't support, that I was like, oh, everybody out of the pool, like, nope, you're all gone. And I think we do that a lot in our life,
Yeah.
because we go, I don't trust this. Like, we do that in relationships. We do that, like when we get hurt, we go, yeah, anything that touched that, tainted now. I don't trust it. Rather than
Yeah.
going, what role did I play? Where was I too naive? Where was I
Totally.
too trusting? And then going, well, if I can clean that up, now I can actually become curious again. Can become innocent again. I can become trusting again. But if I think that it's not something that I have control over, if I don't recognize the role I played in it, then that's all a threat. And anything connected to it's a threat. But if I can go,
Yeah.
well, shit, I was just wide open. I was just not discerning. I wasn't really, like my curiosity was everywhere, as opposed to going, what's real? What's real for me? Like what matters to me? Because it's all real, but the idea of, where do I place my innocence, and where can I trust, and when that's available to us, through our own discernment, and then all of a sudden we get to be childlike inside that container with our
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say that's been probably, when you look at spiritual people, like what are the big complaints for people that are trying to get something done in the real world? They're like, they're always late, like they don't follow through on things, they're always just off in some other world. Like, can you please get shit done? Can you please pull your shit together? And like that is like that childlike innocence, that naiveness. And like all the work that we do is about like, how do we ground this in? Like, let's stable this, let's bring something powerful through us onto this planet that makes a difference and changes things. And how do we balance that, right? Because I've had some incredible spiritual experiences with people like that are super
Mm.
just innocent and open and childlike, and everything's magical. And sure, it is, but they also, the rest of their life's a mess, and they just can't get their shit done. And so that balancing of it, and they're not really happy. They're having all these incredible experiences, but
Yeah.
they're frustrated
Mm.
and
Yeah.
exhausted and
Yeah.
all of those things. Yet their life's full of magic. And so like this piece that we're talking about is just so important, of like, how do we be solid and concrete in the ways that are important to us, but still allow for these magical containers where we can open up and just be trusting and childlike and innocent, and know that we're being supported, know that we're being guided through this. Um, but take our responsibility in it. Because if
Yeah.
we just go, that's all dangerous shit, or if we
Yeah.
go, oh my god, it's all magical, like we're like in 10 again, we solve problems with the opposite problem. It was all magical until it wasn't. No, all that shit's bad, so now I'm gonna go over here, right,
Hmm.
and solve it with the opposite problem by shutting it out. Or, oh my god, like I've lived such a boring life, and all of a sudden this opened up for me, so I'm just gonna become like a child and just completely open up to all of it. um Solving the problem with the opposite problem. It's
Yeah.
about selective innocence. I love that
Yeah.
term. I think that's the next trademark.
Selective innocence. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you're talking about personal responsibility. So there's this this world that opens up that is super fun to be in and feels
Hmm.
good and all those things. And if you don't do anything with it, then there is no discernment at play. Then there's no personal responsibility at play. Like if it opens up to you, fantastic. Now, how do you employ that into your life? What's the actions you take to do it? And and that gets hard. And so it's
Hmm.
sort of way easier to just go play in it and have
Yeah,
fun in it and have
absolutely.
that innocent experience in it. And
Hmm.
and that's sort of cool for a little bit, at least in the beginning, I think, because
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
happening. And then
Hmm.
at some point, you got to ask yourself, what am I doing with this thing?
Absolutely. And I always call it, like your second childhood. Like when that opens up for you, it is a second childhood because you become so curious and so alive. And then, but childhoods aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to like grow into a level of like, awesome. I have all this magic. What am I doing with it? I have
Yeah.
all this access. What am I doing
Yeah.
with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it,
Yeah.
and not the old, become a jaded, grumpy person with it, right? Like, but like ground it, like change the world.
Yeah.
And not by getting angry watching a debate, but by changing the frequency of yourself and everybody around you.
Totally. Yeah. You're not gonna change anything in that debate conversation in and around it. But if you take what you have access to and start to build something that's meaningful for you, that's meaningful for other people,
Hmm.
and start from clean, you're building something unique and exciting versus
Yeah, yeah.
let me go take a dip in that pity party pool, or whatever it
Or
is,
anger pool, or
whatever,
like
yeah, like
the sky is
negative.
falling pool. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, nothing good pool. Yeah. Um, and go over here and do something. Um, that sounds way more productive and way more interesting. And that other thing's still gonna exist. Don't you worry. It's gonna be over there. They're gonna still do their own shit. Um,
It'll be waiting for you if you decide
it,
you want to go back, if you
yeah.
miss it.
And some of it may actually roll into your world, right? There's decisions that are being made over there that you're gonna have to deal with in your side of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
But isn't that why we're here? Isn't
yeah,
right? Aren't we here to learn the lessons and do the things and do the work? And
yeah.
but from this place of operation, not from that place of
Not
operation.
entangled in the problem, but
Yes.
operating in the solution. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And that can be hard. And
yeah, yeah,
so there's not a, well, then why should I do it? It's that, but that's why you came here. That was the agreement. So
yeah,
let's get moving.
yeah. And we're multi-dimensional beings, and it's like it used to be like 80% of the population's emotional body was turned on that had that empathic ability, and now to me it feels like it's like 73% and growing, because there's a part of us that is turning on. There's a frequency on the planet that is affecting us, and the more and more of us that are turned on, the more it turns on the people around us.
Yeah.
And it's like it's growing, and so we're going to have to deal with this whole other part of reality. And if you're listening, obviously you have an awareness of it, you have experiences in it. And so like it's all about grounding it in and having that selective innocence where we can open up to the magic, but also being real with ourselves and going, okay, I'm in charge of this. I'm in charge of the containers in my life. I'm in charge of what I'm bringing, how I'm showing up, the energy running through me. And that's what aligned living's all about, is being really intentional with ourselves, and
Yeah.
opening up to that magic, but
Yeah.
selectively.
Totally. Yeah. And have the conversations. Find someone you can trust and start to have the conversation with.
Yeah.
Uh, you'll be surprised that someone goes, I something like that happened to me too. I want to
Yeah.
tell you about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people are just having experiences and they're hiding them inside themselves
Yes.
because people are going to think I'm crazy.
Yes.
And that's what I love about the group programs. We start to do stuff and the person next to you normalizes, the person on the other side of you normalizes it. And we're like, okay, well, it's just real. What are we doing with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you realize that's your ball, right? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you get to run with that thing. And that is a
Yeah.
hoot. That is a hoot
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all by itself.
Yeah. And I mean, that's your animal communication story, right? Like that's what
It
happens.
is.
Like, shit, what am I going to do with this? Like, this sucks. This sucks that I have this gift. Right. But it doesn't suck. It's fucking awesome. And now I have to deal with what I have on my plate. And I'm going to have to be that weirdo. I'm going to have to
Yeah.
just go for it.
Yeah. I was having lunch and non-beers with a buddy of mine yesterday. Um, he was having a beer. I was having a non-alcoholic beer because that's the better option these days. And we were talking about like plant medicine and animals and like all the things around these things. And he goes, uh, like this just isn't the place for it. It's
Yeah.
just not the place for it. And I said, yeah, I hear you. I talked to this professor about animal communication, this gentleman in England, maybe London, and he said that what's your experience